Welcome to Joey's Social Club. Today's guest, we have Nicholas Seifert. Hey, Nick, thanks for coming on.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Are you enjoying the amazing weather down there?
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's not fantastic up here in Chicago.
Oh, really? What's it like there?
It's like an icy snow.
Oh, brother.
Yeah,
Holy cow.
but you'll get a chance to experience that really soon.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
I'm praying for a little extra snow because you like to give me those phone calls, once a day or once every other day saying, "Yeah, how's the weather up there? I know it's a little cold down here. It's in the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile,
Well,
it's 30.
yeah.
Meanwhile,
Third.
it's 30 degrees down here, 20 degrees.
Oh, man. I
So
don't
it'll be
know.
a nice
I'll be
little
able to-
escape for you to make sure that you really appreciate being south.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have the how long's it been? 40 years? 30 plus years?
30.
The
Yes, sir. 30 plus years.
the um the documentary's coming out end of
Yep.
this month.
End of this month. Looking forward to it.
Are you excited?
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
I mean, it took forever.
A lifetime. A
Right?
lifetime.
A
Yes.
lifetime.
A lifetime.
Did you enjoy when you came in, coming in and shooting it?
Yeah, yeah, I did. It was really cool. Really cool. I did enjoy it.
Yeah. What were
Yeah.
some of like I guess the highlights of coming in and going through everything and going through all the pictures and the records and all that stuff? Was there anything that like really stood out?
Well, it obviously brings back a lot of your past, a lot of your memories,
Yeah.
and it was kind of a wild ride. I mean, we've gone from the tragedy and investigating, and then we were with the family secrets trial, and finally it's coming to an end. It was coming to an end on the court end of it. So it was definitely a different experience. And then doing the docu-series, obviously, makes you reflect and think about your past and growing up and how things were at the house, and how dad was and mom was, and so I mean there were a lot of great times, but then there were some bad times.
Did it jar anything from your memory? Did it jar anything loose in your memory that you didn't necessarily remember right away? Like we were going over stuff and you're like, holy cow, I completely forgot about that.
Well, there's always stuff that you forget about, but I don't think so. Just no, I think I remembered quite a bit, from that time. But there's always stuff that you always say, well, God, man, I forgot about this, or I forgot about this guy, or what this event that happened and that happened. But you know,
Yeah, I mean,
it,
because you were a lot older, so obviously you had more memories. You did a lot more things. You went a lot more places. Um, were there people that you remember from the factory or from just that period of time that reached out to you and said, "Holy cow, I didn't even know you did a book, but now you have a documentary coming out"? Or
well, nobody that's reached out to me. The only person that I've been trying to contact from those days, and you probably wouldn't remember, is a guy by the name of who was actually one of Joe Lombardo's soldiers, was Ralphie. And I remember that guy mostly because he was also close with Dad, and they had a good relationship. So he was like one of the regular guys that was in that clique. He wasn't necessarily one of the outside guys that were just there to work and stuff. Ralphie was one of those guys that were involved in the clique, and obviously Dad introduced Ralphie to us and everything else, and that's how I always remembered Ralphie. And he was one of the guys actually I wanted to try to reach out to as well, to find out different things that may have led up to the events, or different things that he may have known. And Would he have talked to me? I don't know.
How did you originally meet? Did Ralphie work at the factory, or was he just around? Or
No, no, no. He was there. He was a guy that was there every day. Not like,
he
some of
was
the
at
other
the
guys
factory every day?
at International. Yeah, he
Okay.
was at International every day. Not obviously not Plastomatics, but he was at International Fiberglass every day. So during, obviously after school, rarely, only when I got in trouble, but
Which
then
seemed to be
usually,
every day, what you told me.
yeah. Um, and Dad would have to pick me up from school, but most of the time it was like Saturdays, because Dad would work quite a few Saturdays, or summer break or Christmas break or spring break. I would go to the factory, and that's when I would really, see those guys all the time. And then, like I'd mentioned before, they would always send me out lunch runs and stuff like that.
And that
So,
factory you always said was never your favorite place because all the fiberglass.
oh man, no way. Like I'd mentioned to you before, I wouldn't even really get there yet. Yeah, I could get within a couple miles of that place, and I'd already start feeling, the itchiness and everything else. I mean, I literally hated that place. You
Yeah.
know, it wasn't. It was, and then it's a distinct thing. Working with fiberglass, you can, even as I grew older and actually moved to Florida, there would be times where I could drive down a street and I could still smell like maybe I was going into an industrial park or something like that, and they were doing fabrication on boats or whatever.
Yeah.
Once you smell that fiberglass and the resins and the gel coats and stuff like that, that's a smell you never forget.
Yeah.
It's like, remember when we were kids, another, it's funny. When we were very young, we used to go to Wisconsin,
Uh-huh.
and you could smell that Nakusa paper mill for miles.
Do you know it still stinks?
I
It
don't
still
know.
smells. The
I
factory
know.
is the paper factory is still there and it still stinks.
Oh man, you could
That's how
smell.
people know that you know what you're talking about. Is when you're like, God, that town stinks from 10 miles away.
And we used to go to that park. You sent me some of the videos. If you remember, like the pool and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually in the town of Nakusa.
Nakusa, right? That's where I learned how to swim.
Yeah, and holy cow, man, that place, you could smell that paper mill for miles.
Terrible. And it still stinks. You can still smell it.
Yeah, but that's the same thing with, National Fiberglass and then Plastomatics. You can smell, fiberglass, and,
Yeah.
and that was one road that I knew when I was young. That because Dad would even say to me, "Well, come on over here. I want to show you this and teach you this, so when you grow up, you can." And I'm like, "Yeah, you don't have to worry about it because I'm never
Yeah.
working here." I would
But
do.
can you imagine though if everything didn't happen and he stayed with the factory and everything and how big fiberglass was going at that period of time? Can you imagine what he would have grown that thing into?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what. Uh, Even though I was young, 9 to 12 in that time frame, I knew Dad was. He didn't really like the fiberglass business himself. He was good at it, and he would get in there and do it. But his um, aspect and his goal was to get into plastics,
Mm-hmm.
and you know he would have taken the plastic business to all levels.
Well,
And
wasn't that just starting back then, the injection molding?
yeah, and vacuum forming and stuff like
Yeah.
that. If you remember, he had a vacuum forming machine in the garage of Grandma and Grandpa's house, and that vacuum forming machine was a huge machine. So, and what I'm getting at is too is there's no doubt in my mind that Dad would have started into like bed liners,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that was vacuum formed, and I know that that would have been the way that he was going to go, and different injection moldings and vacuum forming and stuff like that. I think fiberglass was his primary thing because that's what brought in money. But I think that he was looking towards the future, and he was going to slowly, and that's when he met, Harold Lurie and stuff, and he was going to slowly get into the plastic business. And if he would have gotten into the plastic business, as a result, you could, you go to, a lot of the museums or the Museum of Science and Industry or Brookfield Zoo, Lincoln Park, you
Mhm.
see those little injection molding machines. Well, those were designed by Dad, and he was the first one that implanted them in those, different areas. And I think he was going to that future, into the future, and he was going into that avenue of the business.
So
You
for
know,
people that don't know, those little machines, you stick a quarter in it and you get it's hot, like it'll it burns your
yeah,
hands when you take it out, but it's like it blows like a plastic like dinosaur or whatever it is. And it's at all of the parks and everything.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, because he had a lot of frustration with fiberglass. With fiberglass, I could tell you a
Yeah.
story. We did a job, and I say we, but because I had to go with him. He did a job over at Brookfield Zoo. Not
Hmm.
a lot of people know this. He did the dolphin tank, and this is back in the '60s. He did the dolphin tank, and what had happened was obviously they had to drain the pool, put the animals somewhere else, and then Dad would go down there and fix everything in the pool, the cracks or whatever that was happening there,
Hmm.
uh, and different leaks that were, in the pool. And he fixed them with fiberglass. And then, of course, he'd tell the guy, hey, listen, you got to wait, 30 days before you fill the pool and put the animals back in for the fiberglass and stuff like that to cure. Well, that job turned out to be the job from hell because we ended up having to go there 3 times. And by the third time, oh man, he was pissed, having to go there. And I imagine it was like kind of like any other business. He got paid very well the first time, but then having to go back there the second and third time, he was just getting, maybe just to cut his expenses for the materials.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, and I know he wasn't very happy because there was one time, and we used to take this ratty. He had a station wagon, not even a cargo van. It was a station wagon, and he used to have all of his gel coats and resins and fiberglass and stuff like that in the back of the station wagon. And then one time, we had to take all this stuff. He had this like cart, and he would wheel this cart through all the way to the exhibit. And he forgot something. I think some buckets or something like that to mix the resins and the gel coat together. And so he tells me, he says, "Oh, go back to the car and get this." Well, of course, that was a setup because, the minute I come back with the wrong thing, of course, I get my ass kicked. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I'm very specific on, okay, what is it exactly you want? And
Yeah.
this and that and this and that. I remember him saying, don't make a big deal out of it. Just go get the stuff. Well, on the way back from getting the stuff, obviously I've got to go through the park, Brookfield Zoo, and I got distracted with the lion exhibit. And and then all of a sudden it was like 30 minutes may have went by. And then I all of a sudden thought, oh God, I gotta get back. I gotta get back. And he's like screaming at me, where have you been? I thought you were lost, and all this other stuff. But yeah, that turned out to be the job from hell there because we ended
Yeah.
up having to go there like 3 times.
Do you remember the first time Lombardo walked in the door? Joe Lombardo, like you met Joe Lombardo?
Yeah, it was at International Fiberglass.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was at International. Um, I met him. I believe that the first time I met Joe Lombardo, I met him by himself, without Bonnie Vent.
Hmm.
It's just Joe Lombardo I met. And then I think Joe, time had passed, like, who knows, maybe like 6 months or something like that from one vacation, whether it was spring break. I think it was like during spring break, I met Joe Lombardo. And then by the time summer break came along, I think Dad and mom or whoever hired Bonnie Vent to work there in some type of secretarial skills type job. I don't know if she did the filing or what have it, but she ended up to be a fixture there and
Did
working
they
there.
did they hire Bonnie, or was Bonnie, were they told that Bonnie was going to be there?
Oh, well, it could be that Bonnie was going to be there, and she definitely, and that was one of the reasons why Dad was, I think, um, a little bit upset and angry is because the payroll started to be astronomical, and everybody that seemed to walk through that door was on the payroll.
Yeah, I was
And
getting a paycheck.
yeah, exactly. And who knows whether, Bonnie, mom might have a different story and say,
Mhm.
well, Bonnie, and yeah, she was there, but she never did no work.
Yeah.
Mom also did a lot of that. Mom would answer the phones and do a lot of the filing and stuff like that. And
Did she ever do any of the fiberglass work?
no, I never
No.
seen Bonnie out there in the workshop.
No, mom.
Oh, no. Well, I don't think so. At least not at the times when I was there. I never really seen mom. Now at Plastomatics I did, but not at International.
Do you remember any of the projects that they used to work on, like in the factories?
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, uh, they made the one of the things that I remember there was a lot of stuff. They made boats, the hulls for boats.
Yeah.
There were big molds, and actually they used to keep them outside, the big molds. And a lot of the boat stuff, what they used to do is keep the molds outside, but then they bring in one mold at a time, and then they do all the fabricating and everything, fiberglass work and everything else inside.
That was for like fishing boats, right?
Yeah, they were very similar to like a Boston whaler hull, or uh, not really an Intrepid. They weren't like power boats.
Yeah.
They were mostly fishing boats. Yeah, you're correct.
Because there was one left and I had it. So we lived in Deerfield for a period of time. And in
Yeah,
Deerfield, we had that boat. And mom's like, yeah, we made that special for your grandpa because
yeah,
he was getting a little older and we made it so it was like impossible to sink. And me being a teenage, asshole kid, I'm like, oh yeah, let's go take it and try to sink it. So me and my friends took it out into the water. We pulled the plug, and we filled the whole thing full of water, and all of us, that fucking thing would not go underwater.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it
which
was
goes
heavy as shit too, but it would not sink.
which goes to show you, look at the financial gains that he would have made
Yeah.
if he didn't get killed, because that was before Boston Whaler ever came out, which is called the Unsinkable Boat.
Yeah.
Dad was for 29 years old or 27 at the time.
It was smart.
He was light years ahead of his time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then they used to make another little style boat, which was sometimes you'll see it like at colleges. They have these little sailboats that they do to teach kids,
Oh
or
yeah.
how to sail and stuff like that. Not big sailboats, small sailboats, little
Mhm.
miniature sailboats. They used to make those. Then they used to make those.
I remember they used to make sinks.
Oh yeah, Vanity Sinks was big time,
Yeah.
and most of the Vanity Sinks, I think they had some type of a contract with somebody in Florida, because at that time they used to make these Vanity Sinks, and the actual bowl of the Vanity Sink was like a seashell, shaped like a seashell.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And they made Vanity Sinks. They made these things, the praying hands.
I
Uh,
have those. So I
yeah,
have the last original pair. And what I did is I made a mold of them and I started making them again because
yeah,
people are like, oh, those are so cool. Where'd you get them from? And I said, that's actually the last pair that were ever made. Aunt Judy gave it to me.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I made a mold and I've been making them again. But
yeah.
was he making, or was that before jacuzzis got big?
No, yeah, that was before the jacuzzi,
Okay. So that was before.
before. Oh yeah.
Okay.
And you remember Schlitz Malt Liquor Bull?
Yeah.
The Schlitz beer.
Yeah.
Well, he also make the bull heads, which I had a ton of them. And those black bull heads, and you'd
Yeah.
see them in bars and stuff like that. He made those,
Wait, what
and
were the
then
plates you told me that they made?
from Beef and Barrel,
Beef and
they were,
barrel.
yeah, they were, which is ironic. There's a story there about Beef and Barrel, but he used to make these platters, and they used to have hamburgers and French fries and stuff like that. And they used to put them in these big ass platters, and they were made out of plastic, which was injection molding.
Okay.
And they make those platters as well. And then they used to make, and man, he made one. I got to tell you about, and who knows, maybe you've seen it or heard about it, and I would have really loved it. is he also used to make like these crystal balls, okay, that were very similar to the material of the praying hands.
Okay.
Now, in the praying hands, they used to put all kinds of stuff in there,
Yeah.
like pebbles and stuff
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah, like little
Well,
broken seashells and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what he did? He did, which I thought was so cool. And one time in Florida, I was at the gun show and I seen somebody had it. And man, he only had one and it was gone that fast. But what he used to do, Dad made is these crystal balls. They were like, probably about 6 to 9 inches big in
Okay.
diameter. And they used to put stuff in them. And then obviously, it would, well, one time what he did was in that crystal ball, he put a bunch of 45 bullets, 45 automatic bullets in there.
That's
And
cool.
what it really was it was a paperweight. And man, I wanted one of those because, obviously Dad was big into guns
Yeah.
and I wanted one of those and I never could get one. But they used to put all kinds of stuff, rocks and all kinds of stuff in there. And actually talking to this kid one time who is the nephew of Ralphie, who is actually trying to get me and Ralphie connected again. He told me that Ralphie has a toilet seat similar to the praying hands with gold, or not gold coins, but regular just coins like quarters, pennies, and dimes and stuff like that embedded into the seat. You know what I mean?
That's
So that was
funny.
pretty cool. But yeah, they made tons of different stuff, which was it was really cool.
So dad was into guns. Do you remember a lot of the guns he had? Because I remember
Oh yeah,
they
because
used to go to Bell's shooting
yeah,
range on what is that on Manheim?
yeah,
I mean, it's not there now, but
right, yeah. And I remember the guns because it was my job to clean the guns. And he was a fanatic. He was a fanatic, which actually laid down some of the ground stuff for me. Is
yeah,
how I am with guns today. And he would, he'd take his pinky and like especially to his 45, take his finger, and if there was black shit on his finger, and I didn't clean the gun good enough or right,
yeah.
oh boy, he was pissed. He was pissed. So it was, I would end up cleaning quite a few of his guns. So I knew the guns that he had. Um,
Did you ever
Oddly
get to go
enough,
shoot with him ever?
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Both Kathy and I did.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, we used to go to Bell's too and shoot. And I'm going to say something to you, and you're probably not going to believe me, which I thought was crazy. One of his favorite guns was that German Ruger.
Yeah,
Uh,
you told me that.
yeah, which to me, I thought it was a dumbass gun,
Yeah,
but he liked that gun. That was one of his favorite guns. He hardly ever shot it. I think I only seen him shoot it twice, but it was a pain in the ass gun to clean. That's
yeah.
why I didn't, yeah. But
That
I
was a
like,
9mm, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if that was a 9mm or a 380, his, but I think it was a 9mm.
Okay. Did
But
he ever have a llama? Do you remember a llama
I
gun? I know they were big back then, but I know he was big with Colt.
Right. I don't think he had the. I don't know if I can't remember, to be honest with you, if he had the llama or if I had a llama as I was younger.
Yeah.
Not obviously not a teenager, but the llama came in a 380. It was a small version of the 45 automatic.
Right.
Um, but I can't remember if he had. I know he had the 38, the 32. He had that
So you
Ruger.
know
He had.
that 38 I have. I have that 38.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
That 2-inch snub nose. That was the
Yeah.
one that mom used to carry all the time.
Yeah.
And she gave
Yeah.
me, she had the original shoulder holster, all this extra holsters and shit.
Yeah, and I think that was the gun, actually, to be honest with you, I think that's the gun they used to keep in the desk.
Yes, that's the gun that was there the day that he got killed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When she was when everybody had left and gone outside to chase him, she went for the desk and that's where the gun was.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had it in there. So yeah, she
Well,
gave it to me a little while ago. It's kind of a cool gun.
yeah, there were guns everywhere, actually, I mean, in the house, at the shop, and in the car, he had, a lot of this whole thing has really dumbfounded me. But I guess when he walked in, he he didn't know what was going on because he didn't hear mom screaming.
Yeah.
But, he also had 2 shotguns and a rifle in the trunk of the car.
Hmm.
So, I mean, he was well armed, but not protected that day, which, has always been, something that I've tried to dig into why, there were no FBI agents. If
Yeah, I
he
think
was,
we're gonna dig into that in a couple of future episodes because we have some other people that since I put the book out and everything, and since we've been talking to a lot of people that have reached out, and they've given us some inside stories that we didn't necessarily know or hear of before. But the interesting thing is they backed it up with a lot of paperwork,
yeah,
federal paperwork. Um, so that is one thing we're definitely going to want to dig into. But when we filmed the reenactment of him getting jumped in the little entryway,
right,
if you watch close enough, you'll see a Colt 45. It looks like we used all airsoft guns, but they all looked real. You'll see it fall out of his waistband while he's fighting with the guys in the entryway.
sure. See,
Because I thought he was carrying. I thought that day, but he was
oh,
surprised and didn't know.
I know he was carrying it. If this guy took a shower, he took a shower with his 45 automatic. I'm telling you, he didn't go nowhere. First, let me go back a little bit. At International Fiberglass, this is one of the things that dumbfounded me, and I was there to see this. At International Fiberglass, there were constantly FBI agents there, parked outside, taking pictures.
But did
They
they ever
probably
come inside?
that I did never saw them come inside.
Okay.
You know,
So they were just outside taking pictures and watching who's coming and going.
all the time. I mean, in the morning they'd be there before we got there, and they'd be there after we left. And they probably had more pictures of us than I had better pictures at school. But then you go from that, okay, then to that particular day, no FBI surveillance, which
Why do you think that is? Why do you
Well,
think they're there every day, literally every day, taking pictures in the morning, taking pictures in the afternoon, taking pictures at night? There goes Nicky riding his bike down the street to go pick up beef sandwiches for lunch. But the day of the murder, it's crickets. Nobody's there.
Isn't that funny? Just like Sam Giancana, all of a sudden Sam Giancana had all kinds of surveillance on him constantly, 24/7, when he was allowed to come back to Chicago from Mexico. And then all of a sudden, that day that they whacked him, there was,
Right. Nobody's
of
there.
course, yeah, they were called off. Of course,
Yeah.
everybody will tell you that they were called off that day.
Well, I think that's another thing that you and I really want to dig into and on some of the future episodes is when you have a high profile person that is you have a high profile trial and you have a person that is your, let's call him star, he's your star witness. Where's the protection? Like, where is the government that's constantly 24/7? They have somebody on them protecting them nonstop. I mean, nowadays the whoever the star witness was, they wouldn't be able to breathe without the feds being there.
Oh, they would have swooped him up and put him in a safe house.
Right.
But
So why not back then?
But that's what doesn't make sense about this whole story is that, if Dad was such a confidential informant
He was key,
and,
they said.
and he was deep into it, and his word was putting this whole thing down, putting all these guys away: Irvin Weiner, Alan Dorfman, Joe Lombardo, Tony Spilotro, Ron DeAngelis, all these guys. You're putting them away and bringing down Las Vegas and the Teamster scam and everything else, and they don't protect him.
Right.
And then their multi-million-dollar case is flushed down, taxpayers' money, flushed down the toilet because they didn't protect him, and there's no other witness. No other witness.
That's the only day that they weren't there taking pictures or protecting them.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and obviously we all know that because of Dad being killed, they dropped the case. They dropped the whole case
Case
against
fell
Joe.
apart.
Yeah, the whole case diminished. Yeah.
until what, in the 80s, right? Then they ended up taking him
Yeah,
down for all that.
yeah, for the Stardust scam and everything else, yeah,
So
which was
that
pretty
would,
much,
so talking about that and bringing that up, that to me, and I'm sure, you and I have talked a million times about it, that to me points to clear corruption. Corruption on a
on a
police,
high level.
sheriffs, on a federal level. I mean, you have federal agents there, and they all just happen to take a break that day.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you got to be thinking that somebody made a phone call and called everybody off,
right,
or wasn't there for whatever reason.
right, exactly, exactly. Yeah, because even like that day, and it was to my understanding that the day that, I think this was like 1973 when Dad was having complications, but it was before the murder, when Joe Lombardo, and so I've heard that Frank Schweitz was in the car, or somebody, let's just not, we'll say somebody was in the car with him also, that
Yeah.
was constantly doing drive-bys or parking across the street, and Mom saw them before we got off of school. So then what Mom did was turn around and call Dad, and then he called the FBI, and then the FBI told him to meet them someplace, and then they escorted him back home. And from that time period on, they should have, because they already knew who their suspects were in this, Teamsters thing, the Gaylor Products trial. They knew who their suspects were, or who you know, they were going after,
Right.
and they knew Dad had the information. So they should have been alerted right there and then, and he should have been in constant protection if
Right.
he was a strong witness.
So mom talks about that. I don't remember if she tells the story in the documentary. I think she does. And honestly, I can't remember if it's in the book or not. I think it is, but she tells the story about that day, and they bring him home, and they're surrounded. He's surrounded by 5 or 6 agents, all
Yeah,
with long coats
and the
and
shot,
you can see the shotguns, hanging out of their coats,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah, and broad daylight. So
in
the
broad,
neighbor,
yeah, in the middle of the day.
yeah, yeah.
It's like, hey,
So
look at me.
yeah, so the neighbors and everything else now all know what the hell's going on,
Right.
because you see 5 guys all around Dad, like you said, with shotguns and the long coats and everything else. So it was no secret in the neighborhood. Well, Dad had something going on.
Yeah.
What I mean? And then he was in the newspaper a lot during that time.
So if you go back to that time, when he was in the newspaper a lot before the murder, how did that affect you in the neighborhood with friends, or you at school? Did it affect you guys at all?
Um, uh, to some point, it was. But you have to remember, I was with other kids that may not have really understood what was going on,
Yeah.
but their parents did, and their parents were feeding them information.
Okay.
Yeah. Then other kids would say stuff to us or to me, and at one point it was kind of cool, um, because this was before there was trouble, when Dad was, being in the paper or something like that. And then when, there was incidents where Dad could be, an informant or something like that, then, it wasn't so cool. It was, a little embarrassing,
Yeah.
and then obviously everything that happened with the murder, um, it was, that was a little bit hard because we lost a lot of friends, people that I would talk to every day, their parents didn't want them talking to us or associating with us. I could no longer. And even when Dad was starting to have, well, really from the very beginning, Dad didn't like us having people over at the house,
Hmm.
and we weren't really allowed to go over to other guys' house or other kids' houses for any long period of time. Sleepover? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Um, we could go over to friends' houses and stuff like that, but I remember Dad always saying, when the street lights go on, buddy, if your ass ain't on that porch, you're in trouble.
Yep.
You know?
I remember that because we
Yeah.
used to play kick the can and all that
Yeah.
stuff in the front yard.
Oh yeah. He didn't.
Ghost
He
in the
didn't.
graveyard.
Yeah, he didn't do all that other bullshit that parents did, like whistle and scream out the door. He didn't do
Yeah.
none of. If you weren't on that porch by the time the street lights went on, and in Chicago, sometimes that was 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
In the winter.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So you're
yeah,
saying after everything happened, after the murder and everything, you had a lot of friends that they wouldn't talk to you anymore, or you weren't
yeah,
like,
yeah. A
did you
lot
have
of
a
them.
lot of times in school too where teachers treated you different after that happened or
I,
no?
I started to have complications afterwards, where I really didn't, I didn't pay much attention and didn't
Yeah.
care what everybody said, because I was kind of like starting my own journey and
Yeah.
wanting to find out, because everything at home was so hush hush. And kind of probably what you went through too is, then when you would ask questions, it seemed like everybody would get angry at you for even asking questions. I mean,
Hmm.
here he is, our father, and everybody would get angry for even asking, "Hey, what happened?" You said there was an accident, and the newspaper's saying this and this and this, and nobody wanted to tell you. And then people getting a little miffed if you're asking and trying to dig in for answers. So at home, or aunts and uncles, there was, outside of dad's family, mom's family, there was no talking about it at all.
Yeah.
They wanted it to just go away.
But now
and
on dad's
and obviously
family,
we didn't want
how,
it to go away, because we wanted to find out why,
yeah,
and what it led up to, because all of my childhood memories were good with these guys, Joe Lombardo, Ralph.
your screen froze up. Hold on.
Yeah,
Hold on. Are we back?
yeah, I'm here.
Sorry about that. I think that was on my end, actually.
Okay. So when this all happened, that's why it was so hard for me to believe anything that we'd read in the newspaper, because I saw something different than what the newspapers were saying. I saw these guys, they were, the best of friends, family. That's why we called Uncle Joe Uncle Joe.
Yeah.
And Uncle Phil Phil Eldericio was Uncle Phil, and
Yeah.
these guys were actually a part of our family, just like Uncle Bob. I didn't know any different. I knew that they weren't brothers, but they were so connected and so close that they were like uncles. And that's what they actually wanted us to call them. So it was hard for us, and I can't really speak for Kathy, I can only speak for myself. It was hard for us to imagine that these are the guys that killed dad, because they were so close, and at that time we didn't understand, or I didn't understand the depth of what was really going on. I saw things on the outside and didn't start to put together the whole picture until my late teens, you know. But the things that I saw between 7 and 9 and 12, I saw them and lived through it, but I didn't start to connect the dots until my later teens of exactly the connection between Alan Dorfman and Joe Lombardo and Irv Weiner and all this stuff, and putting it all together in my own investigation to figure out what happened.
And what about dad's side of the family? I remember going over there a couple times. I don't remember it a lot. I'm sure you remember more, but was the connection, did we still see them for a while after the murder? Or was that kind of like there was a separation, complete separation?
Well, no, we saw them. Afterwards. Quite a bit. Um, Uncle Bob, actually, Uncle Bob worked with mom a little bit after the murder. Worked with mom, and he would work there at night at Plastomatics. And then Auntie Sis would come over and Grandma would come over and stuff like that for, maybe a year. And then things started to fall away by the wayside. And I don't know if, you know, mom and them had some kind of falling out, but then we didn't see them as often as a family. Now
Mhm.
I would go and sneak away and see them, Uncle Bob and Uncle Tom and Auntie Sis and Grandma, and I would see them um, continuously, and until, Grandma, actually Auntie Sis died first. And, she died because Auntie Sis, developed, well, I think she always drank a lot, but especially after Dad died, she was drinking more and more and more, and
Yeah.
died, obviously, cirrhosis of the liver.
Now I remember, obviously we found this out later, but we found out that um, Uncle Bob was tied pretty close to Joe Lombardo.
Oh, very close.
Like so close that the night before Dad was killed, Lombardo and him met in the back of Uncle Bob's house
Yeah.
in the alley.
Well, uh, Lombardo, there's a lot of controversy there because Lombardo, I have to tell you the honest to God truth. Uh, you know, Dad was warned and warned and warned and warned and warned and warned. I mean, I think Lombardo did everything but beg. I
Yeah, I
really,
mean, from
I,
my understanding and other people that have come forward through the years is Joe, I mean, he really tried. He gave
yeah,
he
yeah.
gave Dad probably more opportunity to fix things than he's ever given anybody else to fix it because Joe didn't want that to happen. I mean, he was part of the family, and he did like Dad. No, you
He,
froze.
he thought somehow, some reason, he thought he was going to walk away from this. I don't know. But Lombardo,
He very well could have. I
if
mean,
he
could
would
have
have
if he fixed with, if he fixed it with Lombardo.
exactly, if he would have just said, "Hey, listen, screw the feds. I'm going to do my 2 to 4 years," because that was, it wasn't like Dad was indicted for killing anybody. It was all financial stuff.
Yeah,
So the most he would have done was 4 years, and it wouldn't have been in like Florence,
right.
or anything like that. It wouldn't have been hard time, you know. But it was to my understanding that Joe Lombardo gave Dad a lot of opportunities to back the fuck off.
I mean, he
And
really tried. Yeah, he really
he
tried to get.
really tried. So much so much. I mean, Joe Lombardo just didn't go to Uncle Bob and say, "Hey, listen, you got to straighten Danny out. Help me with this thing. He's gonna, what's gonna happen. He's gonna get killed. You got to help me, Bob. You got to help me."
Yeah,
He also went to Uncle Tom, and Uncle Tom ended up living with us for 3 months to talk Dad out of it. And Dad just had one journey on his mind, and that was it. I don't know if it was a personal vendetta or if it was personal with Dad and not really business, but Uncle Tom actually literally came to live with us for 3 months to talk Dad down from doing this.
yeah.
So, or, normally they would, I have to tell you, and through your travels of investigating, they would never do that. You came out of line one
Oh,
time,
yeah,
you're gone. They
right.
would they wouldn't, try to, say, "Hey, listen, you got, we got to work this out." Uh-uh. But it's to my understanding that Lombardo went to him many, many times.
So
So,
also through our travels, you and I have both had extensive conversations about a 55-gallon drum
right.
that was in the factory.
Yeah.
And that 55-gallon drum was in the factory, and mysteriously, from the time he was killed to the time that whoever got there to clean out, the inside, the feds or whatever, locked it
It could
off
only
to
be one person.
do their stuff. This 55-gallon drum somehow mysteriously disappeared from
Well,
the inside of the factory.
that could only be one person. And from the inside,
Who would that be?
from the inside guy talking to you. And believe me, I'm not bragging. I was at that factory because my ass was in trouble all the time.
Right.
I wasn't there. I wasn't there to enjoy the day. Trust me, it was no field trip. I was
Right.
there because I was in trouble.
Right.
And that drum, they used to have two big long table saws,
Mhm.
and they had a table saw at one end of the table,
Yeah.
obviously. And that barrel, and you can look at the FBI photos, that barrel was in between the two table saws. And Dad used to put cash in there all the time, all the time. And he'd hand me cash and tell me, put it in the barrel, put it in the barrel. So I've seen how, that barrel was filled to the top of cash, not halfway, it was filled to the top. And back then, they were 55-gallon drums, and they had a ring barrel around the top,
Right.
and you tighten it. It wasn't like, you tighten it, so you'd have to unscrew it a little bit. He just snugged it. He didn't keep it, real tight, but he just snugged it. And then all of a sudden, the barrel disappeared.
So in the
And
FBI photos, you're saying you obviously you don't see the barrel's gone, but you see the ring around
right,
the
right,
on the
and
concrete.
on the rust ring, and
Yeah.
so
So this
and
barrel full of cash disappeared.
full of cash. And I had mentioned this, and I don't know. I don't think Mom at first believed me, and I said,
You
"Well,
might not have known about it.
oh, no, no, no." I think she knew. She didn't know it was filled with cash, but she knew the barrel was there
Okay.
because and it was one of those things. It's like everything else. You walk by it a million times, million times, million times, and probably everybody thought it was full of resin. But then when the barrel disappeared,
Yeah.
you can see the pictures. There's a ring on the concrete, and the barrel's gone. And I showed Mom. I said, "There, that was the barrel.
Yeah.
There was no barrel there." I said, "But there was a barrel there. Look at the circle. That's a
Yeah.
rust ring, you know." And that could have only been done by one person, Uncle Bob, because he's the only person that had access to that factory at night, you know.
So you're thinking that he did it with somebody else.
Joe Lombardo, yeah.
Now, I know that
I,
there's been talk about, corrupt federal agents. There was a corrupt federal agent that was actually working with Mom after the murder.
Pete Wax.
Right. And he was not allowed to, I don't want to call it disbarred because he's not an attorney, but he was discredited and he was not able to testify at the family secrets trial because of his outfit ties.
Yeah.
Because he was also tied to people in Rosemont after, working with Joe and everything.
Yeah. Well, see, and I think truthfully, that's where Mom and Uncle Bob's conflict started a little bit, was because Uncle Bob caught wind that Pete Wax was taking Mom around to mob controlled businesses and asking her, trying to get her to recognize people or stuff like that, or trying to pump her full of information and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I think Uncle Bob caught wind of that and didn't like that. And then they must have had some type of other conflict. But from the beginning, Mom didn't trust Uncle Bob 100% because Dad had told her, hey, he's not the guy. If something happens to me, don't trust him around this business.
And he wasn't the sharpest tool, right? Uncle Bob.
Yeah, well,
You told me the story about the wedding, about
right.
Uncle
But
Bob's wedding.
you wonder if he was as dumb as a fox. That's what I wonder.
Plain dumb, yeah.
I mean, he acted, like he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but was it an act?
Yeah.
Because, like I said to you, that money disappeared, and then I had an FBI agent tell me exactly what happened, and the FBI agent was hunting that barrel, Chris Williams, and I had mentioned this to Chris Williams, and he says, "Well, we know all about the barrel." And that was even before I even mentioned it. He said,
Really?
and we have an idea where that barrel went and where the money went to.
Yeah, where it went.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and one of the things, and I was very close to Uncle Bob because Uncle Bob and Uncle Tom were always telling me what was going on and who to go after, who this guy was, who that guy was. And, they wouldn't tell me exactly go after this guy. They'd say, well, you're hot, you're cold,
Yeah.
look at this guy's name or track this guy down. Maybe you might want to talk to this guy.
Feeding you a little information to appease you.
So Uncle Bob would tell me all kinds of things, and him and Uncle Tom would talk to me about all kinds of things. But Uncle Bob never mentioned to me that he owned a parking lot in the city of Chicago
Hmm.
where you can park for, a fee, you
Yeah.
know. He never even said anything, hey, listen, I not only do I own this place at 6509 North Ashland Avenue, it was a 3 flat, but I also own this parking garage. He
Now,
never
both of
mentioned
those
that.
are some, even back then, were some pretty good cash.
Hell yeah. I didn't know that till Chris Williams told me. And Chris Williams told me that the IRS and the FBI were looking at Uncle Bob about some of his investments
So
and where the
Chris Williams was one of the FBI agents that I remember, and I know that obviously you had extensive conversations with him. Do you remember the day that the FBI knocked on your door for the family secrets trial?
Well, it was crazy. It was crazy. It was the day after um, uh, Connie Chung was having an interview with Cooley.
Oh, Bob
It was,
Cooley.
yeah, it was real. It was, I swear to God, I was sitting the night before in my living room watching this interview with Connie Chung and Cooley.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was just an interview about organized crime in his life and yada yada. He was just coming out with that new book of his,
Corruption was king or something.
right,
You
corruption.
remember when we met him for lunch?
Yeah,
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 he was
yeah.
a,
We went to his house. Yeah,
he
remember? We went to his house.
was a stroke.
So anyway, so then the very next day, I get ready to go to work, and I'm walking out. Right, I'm literally just walked out the front, and there's 2 FBI agents right there. And I'm like, and they're like, "Can we talk to you?" I said, "About? I want to talk to you about some organized crime things." And then at the time, my wife, she was like, because I'd never mentioned any of this stuff, because anybody that knew anything about organized crime,
Wait, you were married at the time and you never told your wife about your past
no,
at all? Oh
no,
shit.
no, because
That's a
that's
wake up call.
well, and the reason why is because you have to understand is throughout our whole lives, and once again, I can't speak for Kathy, but throughout our whole lives, anybody and everybody that knew anything about this, the mafia or anything like that, once they heard that we knew people, or the way Dad was killed, somebody may come back, somebody may,
Yeah.
be watching you, everybody would scatter like roaches. So
Yeah.
I learned actually never to talk about it. And then all of a sudden, these guys, and obviously they didn't have no problem talking about it at the front door with everybody listening, you
Right.
know. So then obviously they wanted to go someplace and talk about, the family secrets trial and what was going on, you know.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard that? Were you like excited? Were you like, fuck off, go leave me alone?
Yeah, at first I was like, you got to be kidding me. And then I went from like shocked to angry, because I thought to myself, okay, well, now if they're going to do this, they're going to, you got to understand, over the years, I've watched them screw up every
Yeah.
case
Fuck up
that would
every
come,
day.
that would come close to Dad's murder. They would screw up every case.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't until, the actual, the casino case and the Pendorf case and the straw man case and everything else, that actually they put Lombardo away, but they didn't put him away for Dad's murder.
Right.
And every time something came along with that, it was just, fell off the cliff. So I figured, okay, here they're going to open it up and bring on all this publicity, and then the case would fall through,
Right.
or maybe not even make it to court. Who knows if they even had, enough evidence for an indictment, or what have you.
Mhm.
So that's when I became angry. And then, because here they're, opening up something that may not even exist, or go
Right.
any further.
Yeah, and then they're gonna drag us through it too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So it's kind of like,
And that's when I found that I thought, well, God, man, I got to try to find out where my brother is, and
because we hadn't
that
talked in how long at that point?
20 some years, 20
I mean,
years,
20 plus years at that point.
20
Do you
plus
remember
years.
the day I called the day I called you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we met. I think we met at Disney World, or
Yeah.
someplace in
Yeah.
Orlando.
Yeah, in Orlando.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was funny. But then we picked right up and started talking like we never lost time.
yeah. But then as time went by, I started to develop a little bit of a relationship with Chris Williams, and I found that he was a pretty sharp guy. He wasn't, at first I thought, they didn't have any, because you got to understand, I've seen a lot of shit throughout my life, and I thought that, at first, this is a guy, this is a guy that's going to end up doing surveillance, and somebody's going to walk behind him and shoot him in the head. You
Yeah.
know that these guys were, way out of their realm. And but Chris Williams was a street kid. He was a he was a tough, kind of like Marcus Funk.
Yeah.
He was a tough guy.
Yeah. Marcus was a tough guy.
Yeah, he wasn't intimidated.
Yeah.
So then that's when I felt more and more uncomfortable talking to Chris Williams and finding out stuff and letting him, pick my brain a little bit about stuff he wanted to know.
Do you remember when we went and saw when they arranged twice and we went to the arraignment
Oh yeah.
when we
Yeah.
were the only ones left standing?
Yeah, that wasn't a good day for me.
That was hilarious.
Yeah, because I was, I'm not necessarily the guy that looks at the end result of the picture, and I was, there was all kinds of things going through my mind
Who
that
was
day.
sitting behind us? Was that Tracy Belimo?
Yeah, I believe it was Tracy and Felice Weiler.
Was it Felice?
Yeah, oh yeah, I think Felice was there.
I
And
just
then-
remember that because somebody wrote an article that was like, that when the judge said you can sit down, we were the only two that didn't sit down. We were like so hyper focused on Schweiss. And then
Well,
one of the FBI agents behind us like tapped on our shoulder, was like, "You guys can sit down now." We're like, "Oh shit." I
Well,
didn't realize we were
see,
still in.
actually, I was casing the thing because I was tempted. I was gonna, because Schweitz was, if you think about this, Schweitz was no more than 12 feet away from us. I
Yeah.
thought to myself, man, I have a chance.
There's no
This-
way we would have got to him though. There was a couple rows in front of us.
Well, after I started to look around the room and look at every individual, I could kind of tell who were marshals.
Yeah,
and
there
who
were a lot of
guy
marshals there.
agents, and little did I know that the broad next to me was Nora Schweitz.
That's what was killing me. You're like tapping me and you're like, "You know who that is? You know who that is?" I'm like, I don't fuck who that is. You're like, "That's Nora Schweiss." I'm like, I still don't give a fuck who it is.
Yeah, I wanted to choke her, just to see his reaction, just to see him, I wanted to get at him some way,
I kind of wish he would have lasted at least until the big trial, to the big circus.
right.
You
But,
know?
Once again, these guys are all old school guys.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
probably would,
completely different breed.
yeah, they would have convicted Schweitz, on evidence, but
Yeah.
Schweitz he wouldn't have cracked and crumbled or caved. He wouldn't have said, yeah, I was there and I did it and this and that.
Right. Oh no.
No, they wouldn't have got nothing out of him.
But again, I don't think, besides other people saying things, I don't think they had any evidence against him that he was there.
You don't know that.
Well, I don't know that, but
Right. There might have been, don't forget about the scheme. And, not everybody was as sharp as Joe Lombardo.
yeah,
Look at the restitution. Schweitz probably wasn't as sharp as Joe Lombardo, and probably, who knows if one of those ski masks had Schweitz's DNA on it. We don't
yeah,
know.
that's true. Because of course, that's the feds will take everything from you, but they won't share shit with you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who knows, his fingerprints might even have been, if I don't know if you remember the cart that they brought in to the family secrets trial that had all the evidence on it, the ski mask, the handcuffs.
Yeah,
Who knows, maybe his fingerprints, they could have proved that his fingerprints were on the handcuffs, because Frank Schweitz was actually the guy that was supposed to try to handcuff Dad,
right.
because the whole thing about that thing is, I think they underestimated Dad a lot.
Mhm.
Because when Dad walked through the entryway, Tony Spilotro shot him right away in the cheek.
Yeah,
And I think right there and then they thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. And then Frank Schweitz was the one that was supposed to handcuff him. And then they were obviously going to take him away from the facility and throw him in the trunk of the car or something and try to take him to another place and
Right.
torture him for information, because they wanted to know what Dad was talking to the feds about.
right.
So we don't know if Frank Schweitz might have had his fingerprints on those handcuffs.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously we all know that they used gloves that day, but they may have, who knows? I mean,
Yeah, who
maybe
knows?
they may have swabbed the handcuffs down before that day or not, who knows, but, or there might have been some DNA on it.
From
Because back in
everything that
the
you
70s,
saw during the trial, how did you
back,
feel that how did you feel with the information that you had before, not the new information that we have now? With the
yeah.
information that you had before, how do you think the feds, how did you feel the feds did with the case when you were sitting there and you heard guilty?
Well,
Feel
I
that they did a good job because they found him guilty, or
Well, that's at that time, not knowing the information that we know now, but at
yeah,
that time, knowing the information that we knew then, I felt pretty good. I was happy. Of course, I wasn't in court every day like you were.
right.
You were like a plant. You were a
Yeah,
fixture.
that was the
I,
fixture.
I didn't have that luxury because I lived in Florida and I couldn't fly back and forth all the time.
My aspirants are still on the bench in the grand courtroom.
Yeah, yeah. But when I was there, it was good, because it kind of, you know, some of my own investigating and everything else, was in that direction. And it felt good that, they at least convicted him and recognized Dad's murder. And that was a focal point of that investigation and that trial. And they convicted him, on, evidence, not pertaining to things that we know now,
Right.
but back then, the evidence that they had, they were able to get, life sentences.
When you heard guilty, did they give you any sense of I don't know, relief or closure? Any Marcus, I remember we interviewed Marcus for the documentary, and he said, it's such a stupid question that they ask, victims. They say, oh, don't you feel better? Didn't you get closure out of this? And even Marcus said, he's like, that's like the dumbest question you can ask. It's like, what fucking closure do you get? But do you
Well, see,
remember, like, did you feel like, okay, yeah, it's done. I got some relief from what I know at this point. Joe was convicted, Joe's going away, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, but see, if you ask me that question, or if you ask somebody, in a different situation, and maybe they were, muggers or what have you, but when you ask me that question, I say to you, there was a little bit of relief because we didn't know anything, from not knowing anything or being recognized anything or any information to actually going to the convictions. But when they did say, well, hey, did you get any closure or anything like that? And I say no. And I say no because I don't feel there was enough pain and suffering involved. I mean, you're talking about a man that was 76 at the trial, or at least in his 70s. I forget how old exactly Joe
I think it
Lombardo
was late 70s, I think.
Right. So he lived his whole life scot free and got away with it. And I mean, sure, he did prison time for other not associated with Dad's murder, other cases he did time for, but for the most part, he was walking around free and able to enjoy the life. Where we may have been walking around free, but were we really living life? I say
Oh, we
no.
were like zombies, still
Yeah,
stuck.
I say no. So, when they ask you, well, did you feel closure or anything like that? I say no, because I don't feel that we got enough satisfaction out of it.
See, I think I can agree with that. But my anger and because I was asked, everybody's like, yeah, great job. They're all fucking in the hallway, high-fiving each other and blah, blah, blah. They're all happy and this and that. They're like, oh, did you, how do you feel? Did they give you some closure? Do you feel better? And I'm like, no, I mean, what closure? What closure did I get? I'm not even mad at Joe. I'm not even mad at Lombardo.
Right.
At this point, I'm mad at the police and the government, and I'm mad at the whole chain of command, because to me, what the fuck took so long? I mean, come on, you've 40 something years,
Right. Well, that
and
was
the
because,
evidence that they brought to trial was not much. There wasn't too much that was new.
right. The only difference the difference was the evidence was all the same. But the reason why there was no success back in the 70s and then why there was so much success back in 2005 and 2007 was the politicians,
Yeah.
the police, the sergeants, FBI agents have now either A, passed away,
Mhm.
or so damn old that the government didn't care if their names came up or not.
Yeah.
It was because of all the political power back in the 70s and 80s and 90s that these guys had, and they were in bed with the mob, and the mob could protect them as well as give them financial gains. Senators, I mean, you're talking about Cannon, who was a senator. I mean, they're just like you and I've talked before. They don't call it the Black Hand for nothing. Their tentacles are everywhere.
Mhm.
I mean, you want to talk about, their tentacles. You talk about school. People don't realize this. Elementary school, middle school, high school. Those cafeterias in those schools are run by somebody. They're
Mhm.
run by the Teamsters Union. Those people are on Teamsters Union's pay. The
Yeah.
trucks that come in to deliver the food to the schools are
The
Teamsters Union.
uniforms. Yeah.
Everything. Chicago is so corrupt in everything. And I mean, you've got restaurant unions, you've got garbage unions, you've got all kinds of people, and their tentacles just reached uh, almost to the hemisphere, you know. And that's the reason why they never did anything about Dad's murder back in the 70s or the 80s, is because of all the political protection they had. You
Mhm.
know, if
Yeah.
if the
There
FBI
were
ever did
bigger
go after,
fish pulling those strings.
yeah, if the Justice Department ever went after them, they get a call from a senator or somebody and tell them to back off.
Mhm.
But then in 2005 and 2007, I think a lot of their political power was starting to diminish.
I think the only reason that they were able to convict Joe on this was, they'll if you ask any of the feds, they'll say, well, we just needed time to put all the stories and all the right pieces together and connect this and connect that and blah 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 blah. But I really think if they didn't throw a RICO at them and tie everybody up with their little RICO package that they love to throw at people, and because they threw the RICO at all of them and kept them all connected, that was the only reason that they were able to convict him. If
Yeah.
he tried to separate. So if he would have separated from that, he for sure would have got away with it again. He for sure would have beat that charge.
Even with a Mickey Mouse lawyer like Halperin.
Yeah.
you know, Even with help, because Halperin was a scatterbrain. I'll tell you what, if I had a traffic ticket, I wouldn't hire Halperin.
He was, at that trial, I
Daughter.
sat back a million times at that trial. I was like, wait, he's not even gonna fight that. He would just like throw his arms in the air and sit back in his chair. I'm like, oh, this guy's burnt out. I mean, he's done.
His daughter, Halperin's daughter, was the sharpest tool in the
She
shed.
was, yeah, she was the sharp attorney.
She was a hell of an attorney.
But wasn't
And
she not available or something? That's why he had to use Rick.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, I thought to myself the same thing. Here we go back now again, 1970s, because when I heard Halperin was going to be the lawyer, I'd done some research on it.
Yeah.
I thought, oh boy, these guys, the feds are, I'll tell you this. I thought that Halperin was probably just as sharp as Joe Lopez, and it turned out not to be. I mean, yeah, Calabrese got convicted anyway, but you
Yeah.
got to admit, Joe Lopez was a sharp attorney.
He was
Yeah.
sharp. And
He
he
was
loved, you know what? The thing that we used to joke about it, but we would take bets. What color fucking tie and socks is Lopez gonna wear today? He'd always come in with his
well,
$5,000 suits and his, matching pink socks. Even Judge Zago would make comments about his tie and his socks.
Yeah. Well, I thought that Joe Lopez, was every bit as sharp as Bruce Cutler.
Yeah, he's sharp.
And Bruce Cutler, was obviously John Gotti's attorney, and and I was concerned that Halperin was going to be a sharp attorney, but it turned out he was as dumb as a box of
I think
rocks.
Halperin was just. I think he was burnt out at that point in time too. Because
I think so.
what was it? Not long after that, he killed himself.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
it wasn't long after that.
Right. It was a few years, like maybe
Yeah.
5 years. I think Joe Lombardo was like on his second appeal or something like that.
Yeah. But then he started using what was the guy I got the paperwork? I can't remember his name. He was an attorney. He started using down in Florida.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Lombardo did.
Yeah, yeah. I forget the guy's name. Hell, I just saw it yesterday, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I have all this paperwork sitting that we're gonna, in a couple of new episodes, we're gonna dig into some of this paperwork that is
Yeah.
pretty mind blowing. Yeah, I can't remember this guy's name. I don't know. We'll bring it up in one of the new episodes and stuff. But yeah, I know. Like not soon after that, Halpern, ended up killing himself.
Yeah. Yeah, he shot himself in the head.
Yeah. Um. So without getting too much into it, what was your feeling when I said, "Hey, I got this guy that came forward, and this is the paperwork that he has. It's all federal documents, and it was a bunch of names and people and situations that completely changes everything that we know."
Well, I'll tell you what, I was very much intrigued, but not surprised. I
Mhm.
mean, because let me go back to 1974. You're talking about a hit that happened at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah,
rush hour.
busy.
A lot of people aren't familiar with the case, but hopefully they will start to get familiar with the case. Now you're talking about there were many, many, and it's an industrial park, so people are coming and going to work
Yeah,
all over the place. And then you've got 83, which is a major Thorndale and 83 major highway that ran in back of the factory. And then you're talking about York Road, Grand Avenue. You cannot
these are all super busy streets.
very busy
Yeah,
streets. So
yeah,
you can't murder somebody in broad daylight and four cars take off in four separate cars, four cars go into rush hour traffic at 80 miles an hour,
yeah.
trying to get away at 80 miles an hour. There was police chase and everything else, and get away without some kind of police corruption.
Right.
And you know, I mean, this was actually a well orchestrated hit where not only did they have four getaway cars, but they also had many blocker cars along the way. And unbeknownst to us, there were also police cars there that were lookouts that were involved.
Police and sheriff,
Yeah, exactly.
which we're definitely going to dig into because
Which is, and some people may not even understand this or realize this, that one of the getaway cars was even held in a police chief's garage for 20 plus years.
so we find that out 20
Yeah.
plus later. I'm out. God, I don't even know where I am, but my phone goes off. It's Tracy Polimo, FBI agent. That's our like handler kind of.
Yeah.
And she calls me and she goes, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "Okay, throw it by me." She goes, "We found one of the getaway cars in Willow Springs. There's a garage, and the garage is tied to, was it a ex police chief or
And
is
his
that
son,
who it was?"
yeah, a police chief and his son, I guess, I think it was his son's house or the police chief's house, but they had to do with both of them. The police chief was the chief, and his son was a patrolman at that time.
So for that long of a period of time, they
Yeah.
have this car in their garage. And I'm like, okay, you're full of crap, blah, blah, blah. We're laughing about it. It's like, it's so outlandish that they kept this car. She goes, wait, it gets even better. There were ski masks and gloves still in the trunk of the car in this house.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
here we
either
go.
they were incredibly stupid, whoever parked the car there, or they were just what I personally feel. They were so brazen and knew that they were going to get away that day, that why not keep the car?
Yeah. Yeah. Their escape travels were covered.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. I mean, because I mean, granted, there were no cameras on this, like they have traffic cameras now and everything else.
Right.
But I mean, you can't do something like that at 8 o'clock in the morning and not get in a serious accident.
Well,
You know,
there was an accident. It was a swipe.
sure,
And
yeah,
one of the cars hit another car, and that lady actually came back. They found her, and that lady came back and testified in Family Secrets.
but she did not want to testify the first time around.
Oh, no,
No,
nobody.
no, because her boyfriend was a newspaper reporter. And at that time, you're talking about this Anderson girl,
Yeah.
right?
I
Well,
don't remember her name, but
yeah, oh, I remember. The first time the FBI approached her because she actually pointed out Tony Spilaccio
right.
in shots. And then all of a sudden she dummied up. And then she couldn't remember, the FBI came to her again and showed her the pictures. And she said, well, I don't recognize anyone. Well,
Yeah.
that's because her boyfriend was a newspaper reporter. And he told her, hey, listen, that's a mob hit. You're a witness to a mob hit. If you go any further with this, there's a good chance you're going to be in the Chicago River. So then all of a sudden she forgot everything for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until obviously everybody's dead, then she came, I doubt the feds, threatened her or anything like that. I think she came forward once she found out everybody, who she got to worry about now,
Right. Right. So I think we're going to leave it at that and just leave it as in the future episodes, we're going to start digging into this paperwork, which we will share with everybody so they can see what we're seeing, all of the federal documents, and we'll start having a discussion on why some of these names were covered up even during the family secrets trial.
Right.
There was an individual trying to get this information. Again, we'll share all those documents, information put into the family secrets trial to clear Joe Lombardo's name, which he was obviously unsuccessful in doing, but we will discuss a lot of the paperwork and why we all think that he wasn't successful to get the paperwork in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to tell you, I'll see you soon coming in for the documentary, and thanks for coming on and talking.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks, guys.
All right.